Alright everybody, how we doing today? Final video at last. From Reason.com, and it says, handwritten notes document the collapse of the phony story that lead to a deadly Houston drug raid. Police Chief Art Acevedo's observations about the fallen nature of humanity are no substitute for reforms aimed at preventing such abuses. A veteran Houston narcotics officer's handwritten responses to questions from internal investigators document the unraveling of the story he concocted to obtain the warrant for a no-knock drug raid that killed a middle-aged couple last January. I screwed up, Gerald Goins, who was shot in the face during the raid, wrote as he lay in a hospital bed because I made a buy without the correct manpower there. Inadequate manpower is the least of the problems with Goins' investigation of Dennis Tuttle and Rogena Nicholas, which the Justice Department says was based on a false tip from a neighbor. Goins, who faces state murders charges and federal civil rights charges as a result of the deadly raid, claimed in his search warrant affidavit that a confidential informant had bought heroin from a middle-aged white male whose name is unknown. At the house on Harding Street, where Turtle and Nicholas lived at the raid, which found no evidence of drug dealing, Goins could not identify an informant who would confirm that story. In the handwritten notes, which were obtained by KPRC and the NBC station in Houston, Goins finally fesses up, sort of. What is the name of your CI, confidential informant, that you used for 7815 Harding? The investigators asked Gerald Goins. He replies, there was no confidential informant. I made the purchase myself. I was looking to buy from a female I bought from the male. I had info regarding people at the residence. I'm not sure if the guy I bought from was the male listed in info. The info, according to a federal indictment unsealed last month, was fabricated by Patricia Garcia, who lived across the street and described Tuttle and Nicholas as armed and dangerous drug dealers in telephone conversations with police on January 8th. Although Goins supposedly investigated the tip for 2 weeks, he does not seem to have known the names of the purported drug dealers, and by his own account, did not know what Tuttle looked like. But that did not really matter because heroin purchase he had made never happened according to the indictment. Yeah, this is what happens when the police operate on shallow information. They fuck up and innocent people get killed. The police need to be held to a higher standard than this. This is completely unacceptable. This is why I used to be part of the copblock.org sharing army, where I would just share the stuff around the internet. I was not actually part of the website page, but I was a big fan of theirs and I just shared stuff around. Police need to be held accountable. And thankfully, now that the NYPD is under civilian oversight, we're going to be seeing more of that, which is great. They should be held accountable for their actions, more so than anyone else, because they're in a major position of responsibility. Goins also admitted to investigators that Stephen Bryant, the narcotics officer he claimed had confirmed that the brown powder substance supposedly purchased at 7815 Harding Street was black tar heroin, never saw the alleged contraband. Officer Bryant never observed the narcotic which was purchased from the residence, Goins wrote. I placed that statement in the affidavit. Bryant, who like Goins, retired after the raid, faces state and federal charges for backing up Goins' fictional narrative. In his written responses, Goins said he bought 2 small baggies of powdery substance from the unidentified white male on the evening before the raid, and he was sure the man would still be in possession when police searched the home. But the only drugs that police found in the house were personal use quantities of marijuana and cocaine. In his affidavit, Goins also claimed that his informant had seen a semi-auto handgun of a 9mm caliber in the house. No such weapon was recovered. All this makes you wonder what Goins' plan was. Had he not been shot during the raid he engineered? Would he have planted the heroin and the gun he had described in his affidavit? Goins' expectation that his fabrications would go undetected does not reflect well on the alertness and integrity of his colleagues and supervisors. As it turned out, Brian did cover for Goins, confirming his own role in the transaction that Goins invented. If that raid had not ended so disastrously, Goins might very well have succeeded in framing Tuttle and Nicholas. He had a history of mishandling evidence and making dubious statements under oath. Over 12, the Houston Chronicle found Goins obtained nearly 100 no-knock warrants, like the one used in this case, almost always claiming that informants had seen firearms in the homes he wanted to search, but he reported recovering guns only once, a pattern no one seemed to have noticed. Seems to me there was no informant. So, on a positive note, because he's dead, a corrupt officer is off the streets, and finally people are safe from a corrupt police officer. But on the bad note, a man is dead. I would have preferred that he had changed his ways, but if he had died, it's just as well. It's sad that he's dead, but now that he is, at least he's a danger to no one. The dead can't hurt you. And dead men tell no tales. But that track record, combined with the loose supervision that allowed this operation to unfold as it did, suggested imposing limits on no-knock raids, and finally requiring narcotics officers to wear body cameras when they execute search warrants to reform that Houston Police Chief Acevedo instituted in response to the scandal do not go far enough to root out the problems in the narcotics division. How do you reassure the public something like this isn't going to happen again? A reporter asked. Acevedo, on the day of the federal indictment was unsealed, his response was revealing. Police officers have engaged in misconduct since the advent of time. Human beings have been sinning since the days of Adam and Eve, right? I mean, we're imperfect beings. I can't guarantee that nothing will happen again. What I can guarantee is that, number one, we will continue to be vigilant in our process and our systems and our adults. We will always ask the tough questions when we take a life. What I can tell you is that the chances of this being systemic are not going to happen because of the process and the systems that we have in time. But at the end of the day, there is an element of trust when you have employees. No matter what systems or processes are in place, there is no such thing as a 100% fail-proof process. And while that is true, you should not be using your religion to make excuses for the failures in your department. That is not acceptable. Acevedo says we will continue to be vigilant in our process and our systems and our adults, which implies that audits, not adults, audits, which implies that the Houston Police Department already was vigilant about potential abuses by narcotics officers. Yet the Chronicle found that the narcotics division had gone 2 decades without an audit. It also found that despite an expert consensus that undercover officers should be frequently rotated to other assignments, 71 officers have served a decade or more in the narcotics division. Michael Doyle, a lawyer hired by Nicholas' family, says supervisors let the raid go forward, even though they knew Goins had not properly documented his contact with the informant. He described Goins' belief that he could get away with inventing a drug purchase by a non-existent informant does not speak well of the HPD's processes. Acevedo puts the chances of this being systemic at 0, even as he concedes that something like this is bound to happen again, in the face of a scandal that should make all Houstonians worry about the security of their constitutional rights. Acevedo's observations about the fallen nature of humanity are hardly reassuring. No, he's just using his religion to make excuses. That's all he's doing. Plus, when you just say, oh, humanity's flawed and nothing can be done, you're taking all the power away from yourself to change who you are for the better. You're surrendering your strength and no longer having the motivation to be better. You're just saying, oh, I'm fallen and I can't do anything about it. I am helpless. When you start thinking that way, you will lack the ability to change who you are for the better as a result. You will lack all motivation, you will lack all confidence. And I hate to say it, but this is one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of Christianity, because that's what it does to people. It takes away all the power from them and puts it squarely on the shoulders of a savior who either doesn't exist or, hell, how do you even know he even wants to save you? Maybe he's been jerking you around this whole time. There's only one thing you know for sure, is that you need to be able to take care of yourself, because no one else is going to take care of you. And that's that. Unless you're a cute little baby, then like the adults want to take care of you. But anyway, just got to learn to take care of yourself, man. The Lord helps those who help themselves, I think, is the type of Christian that I have the most respect for. But this is why police need more oversight. This is why they need to be held to a higher standard. If they won't hold themselves to that higher standard, then the people need to. You need to. I need to. We all need to. Anyway, that's about all. Peace!